Okay, get started here in just a moment as we now wait here for the start of the disqualification show following the race in Martinsville. Kind of pop the link out here. Always be nice if there's a way to copy the link before the show actually starts. That would be handy. I can avoid these first few minutes where I'm more or less talking to myself here. We'll get started. Come on. Come on. There we go. Alrighty. Hello. Welcome aboard, Anthony Blalick and Matt DiBenedetto fan. Getting you started here. All right. We'll wait for a few more people to come in here now that we just posted the link. As of my estimation, I started the timer a little bit later this time around. We are about, let's see, 23 minutes into the wait after the finish on the countdown until the start of disqualification results. Okay, let me bring my camera a little closer here. Kind of get that adjusted a little bit more. There we go. I just lean back in this chair and I just look like a big walrus sitting at this thing. Okay. So let's see what's going on, everyone. Well, certainly in old school dominance in short tracks and Penske racing seem to go hand in hand. If you look at Rusty Wallace's career, driving the two back in the day, and Brad Keselowski sure found whatever was going on at the with the setups and everything like there, and had a good finish out there today, and leading all but a handful of laps. Chase Elliott had something going for him there. It looked like it was going to turn around. We've seen so many races before where a driver in second place is kind of settling back in the weeds while somebody else is dominating the first part of the event. And, the other guy comes up there and the driver doesn't have any answer for it. But Brad Keselowski showed a real veteran move, learning what happened with Chase Elliott there in front of him, working his way back up and getting back around him to claim a dominant victory today. It may have not been the most competitive event, but, quite honestly, certainly an interesting set of circumstances there, seeing Keselowski dominate as well as he did. But, but yeah, it's, the spring race at Martinsville is always interesting as to whether, it's for all the craziness we see in the fall race at Martinsville the last few years. I know that the argument was put forward that the fall Martinsville race has suddenly become the new Bristol, being in that position where it's the first round that people can punch their ticket into the championship round at Homestead. And the spring race at Martinsville, it seems like, especially since about 2012 or so, has really had more calm races going by, but certainly not in the case like this where you had somebody being as dominant as Brad Keselowski was today in this race. But it'd be interesting to see what happens with all that. But an interesting scenario there. On the flip side, of course, with this being the Last Car website, we have to, of course, talk about the issues with Rick Ware Racing and the struggles for both Cody Ware and Jeb Burton being in the bottom two positions, at least as they stand right now, waiting for the final results from technical inspection. Issues for both Cody Ware, who backed his car into the wall during the very final moments of final practice the other day, sent him to a backup car, very similar to a situation that happened over in Phoenix last year. Very similar situation, although I think that one happened in the opening practice, getting eliminated, and that one having to drive an old Premium Motorsports car this week. This one, at least according to what Bob Proctor's posted on there, that Rick Ware team had to quickly shamble together the car that the team had at Fontana last week, try to get it set up for a Martinsville race. And apparently there was some issue with the brakes, certainly. Kind of reminds me a little bit about Dave Marcus trying to run his Darlington car at Watkins Glen. Sometimes you have a situation where, a car just isn't ready for the show, and despite the efforts to actually present one. I mean, again, hardest working group of guys out there, the Rick Ware team. Again, that when they were getting that premium motorsports car set up at Phoenix last year, seemed like they were really working hard on that, and thankfully had a car to show for it and get a run going there. But Cody Ware, my heart just breaks for him. I mean, I've been writing a lot about him at the website here, and other articles about him, and it took till just last fall at Talladega for him to finish a Cup race under power. He'd either been driving for his family's team when either they didn't have the funding to run full races, or just having bad luck, just mechanical issues, backup cars, and all that kind of thing. So to see them struggle with very much the same issue as last fall there, and then having to go to a backup, definitely a tough pill to swallow. But as I reported on Twitter there, I was listening to the radio communications during the race about what they were talking about with the car, and they had a brake issue. There was some flames or some smoke underneath the car. There were some pictures that were shared as well on the website. I believe I retweeted a couple of those that were covering issues with the 51 there. He just went behind the wall right after that, and it wasn't long. It was about a lap 70, I believe it was, when the crewman came over the radio and said, "Look, I'm not going to risk tearing this car up or anything like that." I don't know if that was Rick Ware himself or the crew chief. I couldn't understand the voice over the radio, but clearly they didn't want to take a risk at wrecking another car, and so they fell out of the race there. And not exactly sure what happened with Jeb Burton, but different deal there. So rough situation for them there, but unfortunately that's the aspect of racing that comes in. It's we kind of see the best and the worst there at both ends of the field. But hopefully Rick Ware's team can kind of get things figured out. Texas is certainly a difficult track to get a turnaround there, being as fast as it is, and is easy for these smaller teams to fall laps down. So, okay, engine problem for Jeb Burton. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I saw him go behind the wall. At least he was already several laps down at the time. I didn't catch the exact issue, but looks like something else mechanical going on with that. I mean, he was of course running his primary car, but different set of circumstances there. But yeah, I mean, generally, just a pretty enjoyable race, and a pretty enjoyable race weekend. Throughout the field, these different competitors in there. We had what I was particularly interested in, the NASCAR, not an official series yet, the NASCAR Truck Series race yesterday at the same Martinsville track. A huge entry list to begin with here. That we had so many entrants trying to get into the race. Let me pull up the listing here just to make sure I get my numbers correct here. So ultimately, it came out to about 41 entrants in the original list. We had 3 withdrawals, actually 1 driver switch when Daniel Sassnett was moved over to the primary Josh Realmone truck, and was able to make his debut in that. So many big names that were sent home. One of them, unfortunately, being DJ Kopp, fielding the team owned by Mike Mittler. They had run most recently at Las Vegas a couple weeks ago. Scott Stenzel finished last in that event. And unfortunately, Dawson Cram was the second fastest of the trucks not to make the main event. Ray Cicerelli, Norm Benning, Tony Marakovich back into the truck series with his own owner-driver operation. And that was really the story of qualifying, is a lot of these teams coming in included, as I mentioned on the website there, 2 new owner-driver operations, which is really good to see. I mean, we don't really see it in the Cup Series anymore, which is unfortunate, but I'm glad that at least in a national touring series, we're seeing it in some form. In the Truck Series, you had both Timmy and Tyler Hill starting a new team, running the number 56 that their father Jerry ran in the Cup Series part-time years ago. This is actually a separate team from that. It sounded like that they were starting it. I was originally thinking when they ran the same number that maybe they're running out of their father's old shop. I don't know that. It doesn't sound like that was the situation. It sounded like that when their interview, I believe, is at catchfence.com. They said they just started, their own team, and said they wanted to have a tribute to the team that their father used to run. So it sounds like it's a separate operation, but very much keeping the torch going there. And qualified for the race, started 23rd, finished 21st, completed all but 1 lap. They were the second truck 1 lap down behind Spencer Davis. The Mark Rett team switching truck numbers this week from the number 82 to the number 11. So a good run for them. Looking further back, Corbin Forrester, Jordan Anderson, also in the race. Corey Roper, again, can't buy a break starting out here. He had the problem at Las Vegas after qualifying so well. Qualified 22nd at Martinsville, had a rear end issue. And even though it was 25 laps short of the finish, the only other person that fell out of the race was Gus Dean with his oil line issue. And so he ended up finishing next to last. Dean, your subject for this week's Truck Series article, which is still in the works, haven't finished that yet. So that's going to be up later tonight, along with the Cup Series article pending the results from inspection. But unofficially, a Cody Ware article for that. And we'll see what happens on that front. Looking back here, let's see. Checking back. Still looking at the results here. Yes, got a couple of things to cover here as well. I want to get to the new video series, or at least the new video that I did this past week, the terrible broadcast. I want to cover that in a little bit. I'm going to transition into that from what we have from the races this weekend, and a couple other issues I want to kind of discuss here. Kyle Busch winning the Truck Series race, 201st combined series win across the top 3 series. Great run for Ross Chastain. Again, must be said. It's unfortunate in the Cup Series race. They again had some issues. The axle flying out of the car, costing about 70 laps behind the wall, and then of course the car breaking down a little bit after that. Damage underneath was just too much for them to keep going, it looked like, and so the 15 fell out of the race as well. But in the Truck Series race, however, very different story. Driving for Al Neese, the only driver that has started every race this year across the top 3 series. You want to talk about Kyle Busch dabbling in the other divisions. Ross Chastain running Cup, Truck, and Xfinity, and the Truck and and really all 3 runs for underfunded or smaller operations in each series. It's a really great story to follow, and especially given the unfortunate circumstances of him losing his ride at Chip Ganassi. He is really making a believer still, and just really just making the very best out of every opportunity. Started 10th in the Truck Series race on Saturday, and took the victory in Stage 2, which ended a streak of Kyle Busch's wins in the stage races there. So a fantastic run for him. Ends up ultimately finishing 4th in the race after leading 53 laps. Great run for him. Be very interested to see what he does in Texas and the other races going forward, as we have the races coming up here. But Kyle Busch beats Ben Rhodes for the victory on Saturday. And the last place finisher locked up was Gus Dean, the first of his career in just his 4th series start. The ARCA Series driver, one of several new stars for Young's Motorsports this year, which really revamped their driver lineup this week. That's going to be really the feature for the Truck Series article this week. Let me pull this up here. Looking at this, you got another post on this. Keselowski wins at Martinsville. Okay, nothing new on that so far. And there we go. So we had the the Truck Series race. Unfortunate situations for Brennan Poole being that far back in the field. 239 laps complete. He had some issues at the beginning with the engine. Travis Kvapil finally making his first start of the year after back-to-back withdrawals at the start of the year and then not being entered after that. Finally gets to drive for Beaver Motorsports. Ultimately works his way from 32nd all the way up to 28th. So he ends up being on just the very outside of the bottom 5. Spencer Boyd also had some issues. Young's Motorsports teams, again, really seemed to struggle at Martinsville. He works his way out of the bottom 5, ends up finishing 27th in the race. But overall, again, interesting stories through the lineup there. And very pleased with Ross Chastain's start of the season. Got to be happy with the runs he's continuing to produce right there. Also in the Cup Series race, we got to talk about Matt DiBenedetto. Really one of his best performances since the Daytona 500. He finally gets a good run going to kind of follow that up. Have been running as high as, I believe it looked like about 12th place in the early part of the race, and ends up getting a solid finish, I believe. Let me verify that here. I believe he was about 17th of the finish. He was, no, it looks like it was a bit further back, 20th place in the lineup, which is actually one spot behind your pole sitter, Joey Logano. So a good run for him there. Austin Dillon, as was mentioned in the Fox broadcast, came up from the 29th spot to finish 11th in the race, just shy of a top 10. Clint Boyer had several pit penalties, finished in the 7th position. Chase Elliott, we talked about earlier, easily the second best car in the race there, still finishing second behind Keselowski. Looking further back, Bubba Wallace, 17th place finish. It's small steps there, but a lead lap finish for him at a track where STP had originally been sponsoring him in the past, and that was not the case this week. Him finishing in the 17th position. Hopefully, some of these other races coming up, he can kind of turn around what's been a difficult start to the year for him. Looking further back, let's see, Landon Castle, 28th. That's a good finish for the Starcom Racing operation. He kind of kept his nose clean. We saw him on camera a little bit getting lapped towards the very end of it. He was ultimately 6 laps down to the race winner there. DJ Kennington brought home the Spire Motorsports car in one piece. He finished 32nd. This was the race that last year he was starting to begin to expand Gaunt Brothers teams starts during the year. The 96 was not entered. In fact, this was the shortest race in the Cup Series at Martinsville since, I believe, 1996. I got to look at the statistic again when I posted it on the website here. And yes, it was the shortest field in the Cup Series at Martinsville since September 22nd, 1996. That race had 36 starters as well. However, it had 42 entrants. So it still had more cars than would even fit into a field today with the 40-car cap after the charter system. So it had 60 NQs in the field in that one, but a 36-car field set basically by the old rule book there. But in general, yeah. So Keselowski, in the certainly in the catbird seats at the start, but of course we wait with the dominance of that car. I'm sure the officials are going to be looking at that car very closely, and so we will anticipate. Nothing is over yet. We're going to find out what happens there. But Keselowski so far a clean sweep of the first 2 stages, as well as winning the main event, leading 446 of 500 laps, and that is quite the crushing victory there. Let's look again at my other notes here, and let's track what we have here. We are now about 39 minutes into the wait for the inspection results. So let's look at my notes here, and let's cover some other issues here. Okay, we talked about the owner-driver operations in the Truck Series. Oh, another thing I want to get to, I'm gonna kind of tease the broadcast thing a little bit later here. The NASCAR Scene Vault, the Scene Vault broadcast. I was fortunate enough to be on that podcast this week. Rick Houston and myself have been working for a while to find a spot on the show there, and we got an opening there this past week. And so for those of you that are in the Scene Vault Patreon, you can actually listen to that episode right now. It's available for members of all tiers on there, as far as I know. If you check that out on their list. For everyone else, that podcast, I believe, is going to be up this week. If not this week, I believe next week. So it shouldn't be too much longer with their current schedule. It was very interesting. And again, going back to the J.D. McDuffie book and talking about, the inspiration for writing it, and kind of talking about, Mr. Houston does, an excellent job with his interviews in particular, with certainly from his experience, it really comes across. He actually kind of stopped me a few times there to kind of really think about it. I was really kind of chewing on some of his answers there. So I won't spoil too much of it there. So definitely go check it out when it comes online. It's definitely worth a listen. It also is included in the part that has the third part of the interview with Jeff Bodine, which has been part of their recent features the last few weeks. So it'll definitely be worth a listen. So definitely check that out. And for those of you who haven't checked out the book, of course, I have it right over here. I have copies still available on lastcar.info. Copies here for $22 a piece. If you're interested, go to the link I'm about to post on the page here. And I can also sign or personalize those. Make a great gift if anybody's interested. Let me post that in the thing as soon as I get the correct tab open. And then we will get into some other fun stuff here. Yes, this is my Rusty Wallace jacket from 2005 Corey LaJoie Fan 32. I picked this up. This is back. It's the last call version there. As a Ricky Rudd fan, I have to admit I had a little bit of glee when Rusty Wallace finally retired, because you physically cannot be both a Ricky Rudd fan and a Rusty Wallace fan. At least that's my thought. So I was I was quite pleased that Ricky Rudd stayed in the sport even longer than Rusty. He's a great guy, I'm sure, but back in the day when before back in that time period, that was Ricky Rudd was my guy. That was, and I talked about that a little bit in the video I did a while back, and the rivalry is definitely still there, but and also that's another interview on Scene Vault podcast I'd recommend listening to. But again, and another thing I want to mention with the JD book as well. I was interested in the thing during the broadcast where they said that they're suddenly having the passenger side windows required on the cars during both short track races now, where they had originally been just used on longer tracks. The thing that interested me about that, and those of you who've checked out the book, know this from the story. The account of the accident, at least that cost J.D. McDuffie his life in 1991, was originally blamed on debris entering the car through the passenger side window. And the investigation was not an official NASCAR investigation. However, it was an investigation that was completed by members of the crew in anticipation of any other further lawsuits. I don't know how far that the report was circulated beyond that point, but in it, and from the interviews I've had with the investigator that was in charge of it at the time, he believed that the open window on the passenger side was a contributing factor to an object entering the car and causing the fatal impact. So I'm interested that, again, not to conflate things, but it makes me wonder, certainly, after releasing that book and wondering how widespread that investigation was aware of, or maybe people weren't really aware of it at the time, that suddenly this rule change has been put into place. I know from the broadcast, they were saying something about them creating a new structure around it because they're putting a new Nagaduct on the passenger side window and trying to do some kind of different thing there. But I sense that, again, much like with the change to the inner loop at Watkins Glen, perhaps there was some kind of role in becoming more aware of that investigation that caused them to make that change. I don't know that, but I can't help but think that in light of the discussion in there, because actually that part of the investigation was really talked to me much more about. I heard that much more from the investigator himself when I had talked to him. So that was interesting. But I don't know. The other part of it too is I'm not sure if they are going to mandate the passenger side windows on the cars during the road courses. Of course, if that were the case, that seems like that would certainly point to a possibility that maybe it had something to do with the matters from the book there. But we'll see it. Sonoma Raceway. That's definitely the first race that I'm looking to cover this year in person. And that'll be one of the first things I would be looking for to see if they have those windows run. Seems like that would be easier to just mandate having those at all the tracks rather than pick and choose as in years past. So that's the other part of that. So let me definitely talk about the elephant in the room here, and by that I don't mean that Rob Gronkowski is apparently retiring from the NFL. Huh? It's first I've heard that. Okay. Goody. All right. Well, let me talk about the video that I've just produced this past week. It's called The Terrible Broadcast. I wasn't sure what to call it until the last second. I was grasping with that so much, but that was just something that I had been kicking around a little bit for a while. And for those of you who followed the website for quite a while, you know that I've been rather outspoken about concerns about the modern broadcasts and the approach that the networks have to covering the races. It's been very hard to kind of put my hands around the exact reason for why the broadcasts aren't the way they used to be. And I know that sounds like very much like a lot of the other complaints where they say, oh, well, racing was better when Dale Earnhardt was out there, or racing was better when, when this or that doesn't exist anymore. But I think the broadcasts are, it's the critical element that can't be overlooked. It's so omnipresent that you think, oh, it can't be that. It's almost like saying that the racing isn't good because the track surface is a certain color or something. It's just something so ingrained in the sport that you think, oh, you're going to look past it because it's just everywhere. But I think it's a critical component. I think that it's what's really been aggravating over it is just a general feeling, really, in the broadcast. I don't feel that I used to think it was an issue of personalities. I used to think that maybe they're just people that they brought in that, just aren't as good as Bob Jenkins or Ned Jarrett or Benny Parsons or anything like that. And while they did have a very self-contained like magic in the booth, quite honestly, as Bob mentioned in his final broadcast in 2000 for NASCAR. I do feel like it's something beyond that, because you still have Mike Joy in there right now, who's still outstanding and has done amazing calls of finishes, and still has done some amazing finishing calls even lately, like his one for Austin Dillon, where he did kind of a throwback to his 20 years of trying call for Dale Earnhardt. I thought it was a great bit of improvisation. So he clearly has the chops, but there's other personalities, especially like the pit road reporters. I think there's still a lot of strength out there that they really do. They do a good job. It's just there's some other elements that just don't seem to feel exactly right. And I get this impulse in my mind where I'm just thinking like I'm just kind of tuning them out. Like and then every once in a while I hear them say something and it just sounds silly, or it doesn't sound like it's relevant, or it doesn't sound like it's interesting, quite honestly. And this is something that, what it all comes down to me, is that it's very hard for the races today to have a lot of rewatch value. I find for a lot of new races, it's very easy to just watch clips from races and just say like, okay, I want to just watch this moment over again, like maybe this finish or this accident or this restart or something like that. I just watch that one part. But in terms of watching like a full broadcast, I feel like watching the older races is much easier. Like, I mean, watching something like the 2000 Winston 500, which was the subject of the first video this past week. There's something about the call. There's something about the overall approach. There's something about the tone and the inflections and the amount of information that's being processed. And it is a clear difference, I think. I don't believe it's just being dismissive of things that have changed in the sport, things that are unavoidably different, the youth movement and so forth. I really do think that there is an overall feeling to the broadcast that's missing. And I want to make sure I made some notes here on this to kind of really guide this discussion here. So what I think really is that when you have the broadcast and it just feels kind of like I really do believe, as from the video I put together, that a boring broadcast can really mess up even a great race. That you can have, maybe we've had some outstanding races really in the last few years, but we're just not seeing it, or just not experiencing it the way that we did maybe 20, 25 years ago, or whatever, during these other networks back when you had the TBS and TNN and ESPN and so forth from there. One thing that I'm just making a couple notes here that I'm going over, is hyping the potential of something happening while either ignoring or downplaying what is actually happening. This is a big thing that I think is a product of the declining ratings and the issues with the sport, where there's issues about attendance, there's issues that are unavoidably there, and there's a feeling, I believe, from modern broadcasts to try to cover that up as best as possible and overcompensate and ignore what actually is happening, like ignoring how many people are in the stands and ignoring all that, and just say, well, look, I mean, this is going to be amazing. This next restart is going to be great. Always looking forward, always looking ahead, not looking in the present. What I think was great about some of the older broadcasts is that you would start off and you would actually they would actually be describing what is happening. They would be engaged directly in the action. And they would say, one thing that I think is perfect from the 2000 Winston 500 call, Dr. Jerry Punch's call, was when he was breaking down Dale Earnhardt's march up the field. And when he had suddenly appeared, he had right at that moment saying, Dale Earnhardt has come from 18th to lead it with just a couple laps to go. And just that information that really makes you marvel at it. And maybe it's something that maybe you yourself didn't notice, because you were watching other things happening in the race, but they were watching it and they were having that information. It seems like those moments are very rare these days. And that was something that was one of the first things that I did in the broadcast there, where I think, again, there's an ignoring of what's actually happening, and an ignoring of what's happening, that's and what's been happening, like a progression of it. And I think that also extends to how the overall broadcast is presented. It used to be that there would also be an effort to create a season-long narrative, or even a partial season narrative. It was one thing when ESPN would have a lot of the big races of the year, except for the Daytona 500, of course, but they would use the championship as a background, since they had the lion's share of the schedule. So you could kind of do, one race to the next. Nowadays, it seems like this stuff happens, and again, much like the observing, like the potential of events, they would move ahead and then just say, oh, well, next week we got this race. It's like, well, wait a minute. Let's finish talking about this one. Let's really get our hands around what actually happened, and not just the leader, but other people that were coming up through the field. So that's one concern I had on that I was really talking about. And that comes up where, and again, it's not any one person that's doing this. It's more of an overall culture in the broadcast. Again, I want to be clear about that, because there are some people that do a better job of this, and there's others that really fall into this really bad wall trips. But there's the problem with the broadcast is also, that brings another issue, is just filling the air with nothing. Just nothing. They're just shooting the breeze through the whole broadcast. And again, going back to not talking about what's happening and everything, is the issue of there's the broadcast, there's a race happening. It almost feels like a podcast being played over a race. That's what it feels like, because they're just talking about, it's okay if you have a show where you have like a round table and everybody just talks about racing in general and the abstract, but that shouldn't be what the broadcast is. The broadcast should be entirely about the show. It should be entirely about the people on the track and what is happening. And it should be proactive in collecting information and understanding it and relaying it to the audience. And that is the kind of information that will get people engaged in the broadcast. Just them shooting the breeze and just like hanging out and sitting on the couch with everyone else and just kind of reacting to what happens. It's like a reaction video. It's like reaction videos on YouTube. They're not interesting. That doesn't make for compelling commentary. It could be commentary, but it's just not interesting. It'd be like if you played this right now over the broadcast. It feels the same way to me. And that's I think that a lot of people have been seeing that too. And the other problem is too, again, is there are other issues with the diminishing of the drivers themselves, where everybody is boiled down to just a car number. Now, okay, I get it. The cars themselves and the numbers, those are the identifiers of the drivers. They're the identifiers of the teams. People that are longtime fans, they'll know who the driver of the 2 is, who the driver of the 6 is, who the driver of the 10 is. But if you just keep going, around goes the 2, around goes the 6, oh, the 10 gets around the 5. Like, no, just use their names. Use their names. If they're, just make sure that you do that. That's always a big issue. And yes, exactly. You mentioned, yeah, there's other commentary shows out there like Race Hub and NASCAR America, but this depersonalizing of it, and it's just calling out car numbers. It feels like it's playing bingo or something. And NBC seems to have more of an issue with this than Fox. To Fox's credit, they do seem to use the names more. But then there's problems with that too. And part of this depersonalizing the drivers is also, again, insisting on being the show rather than remarking on the show. There's an issue where the commentators are constantly hypothesizing and putting themselves into the action. They say like, oh, well, this is what I would do, or I think this is what would happen, or, hey, what do you think, what do you think about this and all that? Like, I don't care about that, quite honestly. Like, if you're going to do that, okay, yeah, you could do that you could do those on commentary shows, like you mentioned there. You could do that on Race Hub. You could do that on NASCAR America. That's fine. That has its place, absolutely. But in the broadcast, you should be focusing on what's happening on the track and just say what's going on. Like, there's so many moments where I feel like something happens and it's just reactive. It's not being proactive about it. It's like, oh, well, what happened there? Or, it's like, well, buddy, you're there at the track. Just figure out what happened there. The thing with Ross Chastain and the axle coming out is a perfect example of this. I know everybody on Twitter was just trying to express, like, look, the axle came out of the 15. That was what was causing this incident. It's not like this just dropped out of the sky. We can't figure this out. You have all these people, you have all these cameras, you have all these resources. Put somebody in the garage area that can keep track of these cars that come in and get that story and get that relayed up to the booth. It could be a communication issue. It could be a production issue. I mean, it could be a talent issue. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not firm what it is. But there does seem to be an issue where they get too blindsided by things that commonly occur in a race, and that's kind of the problem. But that's one part of the thing that kind of messes things up a little bit. The other part is the tone, the tone of the overall broadcast. I think this is something I really hammered really hard in the video there, because it's the first thing that's really aggravating is the overall tone. At one point, it almost feels like the broadcasters are kind of bored with what they're observing, which makes me wonder why they're broadcasting NASCAR to begin with. At one point, they just sound like, oh, it sounds like somebody's on the phone. Like, I'm just sitting here with this, and I'm just being like, okay, yeah, the 3 is going around the 5, and yeah, he's around the track, and see, he's out there, and oh yeah, okay, one moment, yeah, and the 10 is up to the 5th position now, and then the other time they'll put the phone down, and then they'll be like, oh, look at that, and oh, look at this, and it's just like, what? I mean, again, a little bit more on NBC than Fox. I mean, actually, well, it's really kind of both networks a little bit, but as you can see, I'm grappling with these issues even now after doing the video, because that's where it's really difficult to actually express what the problems are, because I think it's really important to get that down to terms that can be expressed and kind of work on making the broadcast better. I do think that's still the missing piece. Is it going to solve every problem? No. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's going to be issues with the racing. There's issues with the competitors or anything like that. I mean, people, have fallen in and out with NASCAR for any number of reasons. But I do think the broadcasts are the one thing that's more or less stayed the same through this entire rise and kind of fall since 2001. I know that we have a new NBC group that came in more recently than the NBC group with Bill Weber and everything. But it's just been a real problem. And then I've seen a lot of comments in here too, mentioning the cameras themselves. I know I've talked about that bit myself too. But you mentioned the zooming in of the cameras there in particular. I mean, bringing see Big Rybone 24's comment there, bringing the camera in as close as possible. I mean, over at Martinsville, I'm willing to forgive that a little bit, because I kind of like the sense of being close to the action, because I mean, everything is right there. But today was absurd. There were some shots of Joey Logano that I swear I could see up his nose. I mean, it was just the cameras were so close that it's like, okay, this guy's got like a really good race going, but I'm just seeing the side, this big yellow rectangle on the screen of just the side of the car, and it's absurd. So, yeah, yeah, exactly. The round goes the car number issue. I mean, NBC, again, this is not against one network or another. This is not even against one specific group. Although there were a couple. Oh, excuse me. There were a couple people clearly, and you could tell from the video. I'm not going to lie. There are definitely people that I was thinking of when I was doing the terrible broadcast video. That, I mean, I'm not a person who could do like a lot of voices or anything like that, but there was one that I was thinking of at one point that kind of turned into something else. But there are certain, I viewed it more as certain attributes that maybe a number of them kind of fall into, but there were some that kind of were a bit more common than others. But that was really the inspiration behind that, because that just needs to change. I mean, there's been a lot of stagnation there. I know Jeff Gordon's been worked into the booth, and there's been I don't know how many changes behind the scenes or anything like that. But yeah. And I'm like, well, I mean, does anybody notice? I didn't even realize this till today, that they very quietly kind of got rid of the Hollywood Hotel, and they brought in this digital studio in Charlotte that they don't have to ship anybody to the racetrack to do. You think that's a little bit weird? Like, what happened to that? Like, it happened so quickly that I didn't even notice. Like, when was the last time that they did the Hollywood Hotels things or anything like that? I'm not saying that format was the best, but yeah. No, I remember. Yeah, they announced they were doing the studio thing in over the off season, but I didn't realize that was going to be a replacement for that. I thought that was just going to be another feature, like maybe they're going to do that. Um, well, I don't know where. I figured it was maybe just for NASCAR America or Race Hub or something like that. But yeah, that's. I mean, today in particular, it looked like Wizard of Oz at the end there, where they had the three of them. What was it? Regan Smith, McMurray, and was it Caitlin Vincey in there? And they had them standing way back in the corner where they're like it's like that drawing you do where you're trying to figure out the perspective lines. You put like one taller person, then a shorter person, then a shorter person beyond that. I'm like, what was the idea behind the camera work there? It just wasn't very interesting to look at. So I don't know. I mean, it's of all the things to change, why change that? Really. I mean, that's like assuming everything else is perfect, but oh, it was a Hollywood hotel that was holding things back. I'm not sure. I'm kind of pining for that a little bit. Even though that was, of course, something well after the ESPN days and everything. But yeah, but the terrible broadcast, I was interested in doing that too. Um, Yeah, I mean, some of the impartiality. I mean, you look at Jeff Gordon's aspect, Beast of Metal. You raise a good point on that. I think back to when Chase Elliott was going to win the Daytona 500 that one time before he ran out of gas at the end, and Gordon was just kind of crestfallen and then didn't really get back into the action. I thought that was a tad unprofessional. I know he was new at the time, so I'm sure I don't know, maybe something behind the scenes he has been working on that, but I mean it's clear that when Chase Elliott is doing well, he's getting more and more excited and stuff, and I know that runs deep. I know he's basically the guy that's really put Hendrick Motorsports on the map even more than Darrell Waltrip and Tim Richmond and the others that paved the way for him there along the way. But it's yeah, I mean that's unfortunate. So, looking ahead, I got to say, while watching this race, I was already getting ideas to do another terrible broadcast video, and it seems like the response has been pretty good. I still don't get a lot of hits on my videos. I think that's mostly because it's just NASCAR and it's a specialized group, so I'm expecting it to be kind of a smaller deal there. But I'm willing to give it a try because it was actually really fun to put together, and it wasn't too difficult. And if you can believe it, it wasn't something I really scripted either. Versus like doing the starting grids. As much as I like doing the starting grids, it requires a lot of production. I have to make sure all my statistics are correct. I got to make sure that I tighten that up as quick as I can. And as you can see, a lot of times I still miss something. I miss like how many wins Kyle Larson had the previous season or something like that. That's how difficult it is. The writing process is actually pretty extensive on that. But with the terrible broadcast videos, what I found is all I had to do was just, I mean, well, really, you're deliberately trying to make it terrible, to make it as an example of what not to do in a broadcast. And so it actually kind of serves better, I think, to do it unscripted. I'm not the best at improvising at all, quite honestly. I usually stumble on that pretty good. I mean, look at how many I've said tonight in this video. But I am thinking about doing another video on that. I'm the other race that I'm working on. I'll have more information on that going forward. I may make it advanced release for Patreon and then release it publicly like I did with this last one. And then we'll see what happens with that. And I think I kind of had some ideas come together with another particularly significant race in NASCAR history. I think that would be a good way to go. And I don't know. I'm wondering if I should do some opposite ones, maybe do a broadcast that's more recent that maybe didn't have a very good broadcast and trying to make it better, like maybe kind of making lemonade out of lemons kind of thing. That would be interesting. I don't know if that would work the same way though. I think people would just get kind of about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking like this, for example, because there's a certain school of thought in racing broadcasts where you have to talk as slow as possible without many inflections and understand a great race for driver number 5 out there looking for the 4th position out there. And then suddenly you just stammer along and drag things out a little bit. And that also slows the action down a little bit and seems like the cars are going slower. And then you see that there's like, oh, did anybody else laugh when Darrell Waltrip said that there was a wad of cars out there? See, I mean, okay, that anybody saw the video, I almost thought he saw it. I don't know, but again, I like Darrell Waltrip. I don't have an issue with with him the person or anything. I mean, God forbid. He put my book in his store, the dwstore.com. He's he figured very prominently the book. I have no problem with him there. I just think that maybe in the broadcast booth isn't the best place for him to be. I think there's got to be some place for him. I mean, heck, if I'm still waiting for them to bring back some show like Winners, like Neil Bonnet was on, and do a driver personality show where the actual drivers are in charge of it, and they just kind of shoot the breeze. I mean, the NASCAR Scene Vault podcast, I think, is the closest thing we have to that now. And Dale Jr.'s podcast beyond that, when he brings people on. That's the kind of thing I think is really, really kind of enjoyable. So maybe Darrell can find something with that. And then Fox could promote the heck out of that. It's I don't know. But then again, I mean, maybe, as I've talked about earlier, is maybe if it's an issue of production, if it's an issue of direction, really, in the broadcast, if they just need to make sure that there's somebody there to make sure they don't fall into bad habits and kind of produce the broadcast with an angle towards informing people rather than just constantly trying to be, the clown in the corner, just trying to crack people up. I mean, what was Michael Waltrip doing carrying that hot dog around on pit road? He was just begging to just drop it into somebody else's air filter again. And then, I mean, that part really gets me, because it is so hard as a media member to get down to pit road, because that's exactly what they think, especially if you're an independent person like myself. If you're somebody that's just trying to make a name for them and you're not really anybody, that makes it so much difficult to get access to these races, because they just think, oh, well, you're not an accredited NASCAR site. You're just some yokel. You're going to be screwing around. You're going to be trying to get autographs. You're going to be dropping food into people's, air ducts and tripping over cars and stuff like that. I mean, you don't realize at the Sonoma Raceway, for example, they close that portion of pit road before the race so Mikey can do the grid walk. And so, everybody else, you can't get down there. It's very difficult if you wanted to do like a driver interview for somebody at the front part of the field. I mean, it's not really much of an issue for me because I look at the back of the field anyway, but at the front of the field, you just can't get down there. And so that's just off limits. So I know what he's trying to do. I know he's a very entertaining person. I know he's very passionate. I know his heart's in the right place. But the grid walk needs some tweaks. Today's was really good because it was really short. But Truex cracked me up, to be quite honest. When he saw Mikey walking up there with that hot dog, it was bringing up like him tripping over the car that one time, and when he's driving the 78 and all that. But it's just irritating. Like, I mean, it's and I think beyond that is, these broadcasters, they have all the access, they have all the toys, they have all these gimmicks, they have all these digital cars, and they think there's a lot of infrastructure that can be used, I think, better than it's being used now. And I think it just takes some clarity of purpose, some focus, some common sense, and just focusing on informing people rather than just entertaining them. The race is entertaining enough. It used to be that was the case. And ESPN would do little skits and stuff like that with drivers. They were fine. They were short and they were early and they got them out of the way, and that was just it. And that was fine. And they kept things light. But when the race happened, they were very professional. They weren't. There have been bad broadcasts before. I know that the late Larry Newber had a broadcast with when Tim Richmond won his last race at Riverside, and it falls into a little bit of some of the modern broadcasts if you listen to that, because it's a little bit disorganized. It's a little bit it's just kind of all over the place a little bit. It could just be the nature of the race itself and longer runs and everything. But it's and even that, it wasn't really that bad these days. They didn't have to deal with a word from Duracell or these other just weird gimmicks. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the plan going forward. So we got So the terrible broadcast, that was first one. I think I'm gonna at least try to do a second episode. We'll see what traction we get here. I haven't decided to make it a full-fledged series. If it gets stale, certainly I don't want to keep that going. I don't want it to become irritating on its own. But I think it could actually have some instructive purpose, is kind of a goofus and gallant kind of way. And as a relative outsider to the broadcast realm, I think that will not be a big problem. I also want to try to keep it as clean as possible. I know people make comparisons to Urinating Tree, and first of all, I'm flattered on that because I'm a huge fan of his work. He's really entertaining. His NASCAR videos are very interesting too. I highly recommend checking him out on YouTube. I've been following him since he did his video game reviews way back when. I know he doesn't really do those anymore, but I still love watching those now. His video on hard driving is hilarious. And the day, what was it? Did he do the Days Thunder video game? I think he did that too. That was a good one. But I'm trying to keep it a little bit more family friendly than he does. I'm not planning on slipping into a lot of that. Much like I do with the website there. I think I'm kind of trying to draw the line at that. It'd also be a little bit unrealistic in the context of what I'm trying to do, which is the average broadcast, television broadcast there, where they wouldn't be doing that anyway. Well, we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes. I think there's a lot of fun that could be had with that. This next one I have in mind, I actually have a few things. I might start messing with that tomorrow, actually, if it kind of starts coming together. But that's what I'm kind of thinking. So let's take another look at the results here. Let's see. I don't believe we've had a call yet with the inspection results. Okay. And looking back here, post-race presser. That is interesting. NASCAR changed the procedure this year, starting with Atlanta, where 2nd through 10th are required to come to the media bullpen on pit road to keep media from having to choose whether to go to pit road or wait for a press conference. 2nd or 3rd don't need to come to the media center. So that's interesting. So, okay. Just looking at an issue where Bob Pockris is posting on his Twitter here about the protocol, the media protocol, as to who goes to the post-race presser versus the bullpen with the top 10 finishers. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm going to be interested to see how that all shakes out. Let's see. Oh, let me also talk about Michael Juskowitz. I got to give a shout out to him here. For those of you, again, long-term fans of the website, you've seen the artwork of Robert Taylor, who we stayed with up in Canada. Very talented artist. Check out Drawn by Rob T on his Twitter account for his work. Very similar to his hand-painted and work on his iPad as well. Michael Juskowitz did an outstanding drawing of J.D. McDuffie that he's produced here. He just posted it on Twitter a few days ago. Let me get I'll put the link here for those of you who haven't seen it. He did a fantastic job on that. I don't know how you get the little details there. Again, reminded me very much of Rob's work when I had him draw the 70 car back when I first met him there. He did a fantastic job on that too. So good to see that. So definitely big thank you to him for putting that together. I want to definitely send a scan over to Linda and Charlie and the other guys, and I know they're getting a real kick out of that. Got to get a frame too for that. I'm going to find a place on this wall somewhere. Maybe it'll be behind me here when I get this all set up here. That'll go with my little setup here with the books and all that. Let me look at the timing here and see where we stand. Okay, we talked about this. We covered that already. I'm trying to keep some notes to keep this a little bit organized. And now I say that as I search on my phone in front of the live stream here. Okay, we have now had in 1 hour and 15 minutes approximately since the finish of the race. We should be coming up before too much longer on the inspection results from Martinsville. Still waiting. Certainly, again, anything can happen. Brad Keselowski's dominant win, I'm sure, is going to make everybody look at the issue with the 2 car there and see if it was really between the lines or if it wasn't. Okay. And let me just open it up to the floor here in the meantime. Any other questions you guys have about the race or anything else that you'd like to talk about in this one? We're going to see. what's going on here in the meantime. Let me just look over your guys' comments here to make sure I didn't miss anybody here. Really appreciate the traffic on here, by the way. I'm really, we're still in the very early stages of getting kind of this show worked out and figuring out a better routine here. But as we go along, that's going to be a little bit easier. But I appreciate you guys bearing with me here as we get this all rolling, and hopefully have some more standalone videos and other fun stuff for you guys coming up. Let's see. Oh yeah, Big Rybone 24. You were asking me if I follow IndyCar at all. I don't really follow it that closely, although I understand from the Twitter feed there. I already heard about the action over at the Circuit of the Americas today. It sounded like it was a heck of a race out there. And Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward apparently having a big feature in that. I wish I was really into it more than I am. I've always been into stock car racing a lot more. I've liked the visuals of it a lot better, the racecraft of it. But I certainly love the Indy 500. The Indy 500 is absolute must watch, and I still think it's the best race of that day. The 600 hasn't had a good race really since 2011, so I'm hoping that maybe this year's with the new package is going to help close the gap a little bit. But even if it's anything like the All-Star race, I still think the Indy 500 stands out best. And the covering the races at the Sonoma Raceway, it was great, having our home track have the season finale. Of course, this year being different with going to Laguna Seca. That's still one I have circled on my calendar, so hopefully get you guys a little bit of bonus coverage from out there, or at least something maybe a little bit more informal that way. And we'll see what happens there. But yes, I do follow IndyCar a little bit. I haven't been as committed to it already as anything. I don't think I've watched either of the races live because they've been contemporaneous with the Cup races so far. Yeah, I'm still looking on here. More reports. I follow IndyCar. Yeah, Ricky Rudd's career when he was driving for Robert Yates. That was a Snickers car. That was I really like that paint scheme. That was the one I talked to the late Sam Bass about that year, because I thought he painted it. It looked like something he would come up with, but he said he didn't design that one. I don't know who designed it, but they did a great job on it too. But Mr. Bass did Jamie McMurray's car. I think the picture that I posted, actually that original tweet where I was talking about the shirt I was wearing when I was interviewing Sam Bass, I think that was actually a different McMurray shirt in that shot. I think that was from 2008. Because it had the Sprint Cup logo on it. But the one I wore in 2007 was very similar to that. I'll see if I can find that one and maybe put that one up in that thread. Let's see. And yes, Anthony. Yeah, we got the McDowell. Looks like he's still going to be the leader in the Cup Series last car standings for this year. Is the only two-time last place finisher, at least again pending the results here coming up. Still waiting on the results at this moment. You're closing in within about the last 10 minutes or so before the expected results from inspection, although it often runs a bit longer than that. I believe we started this a little bit later today, had a little house cleaning today to straighten things out after the race. And Drunken Brian France talk about a free fried pickles at Hooters and a free bloomin' onion at Outback. Which one are you taking advantage of tomorrow? Oh, there we go. Decisions. Yeah, Keselowski dominating the race. Looking at the other post from Twitter here, see if there's anything else new coming across the wire. Really, another Twitter channel or Twitter profile to follow would be James Luther. Definitely check him out at JWLPC. He's been posting some fantastic retro pictures. He's been scanning retro NASCAR pictures of like Dale Earnhardt races at Martinsville in general. Again, at JWLPC. Definitely recommend giving him a follow. Let's see. And looking back, oh, how cool was that at the start of the race too, to run the retro Glenwood car? I mean, really nice tribute to him out there, running that old thing. That old machine there, all leaned over as much as it possibly could. I thought that was a really nice thing. And actually, somebody brought this up. I think it was Steve Lavender brought up the possibility that each track should have a retro car lead the field. I think that'd be a fantastic idea. I'm just thinking back to Darlington and how well the crowd reacted to Richard Petty running that old 1960s machine out there out front, and ended up having to be Black Flag because he was staying out there so long. That was really exciting. So maybe that'll be a trend going forward. That would be cool. Let's see. Looking further back here. All right. Whoop. Oh, let me pull back to the bottom of the chat again. I don't want to miss anybody here. I think I have. Let me. Ooh, come on down. There we go. Nothing yet. Nope, nothing on there either. So we're going to keep waiting until we get some new news here in the meantime. Let me try to find the Truck Series article, but again, I don't have it finished quite yet. Some of these off weeks here, it makes it a little bit more difficult to finish that up there, but that'll be again up a little bit later tonight along with the Cup Series article. I have those outlined already. Both of those were settled fairly early in the race, both of them within the first 70 laps. So this was, which is a little unusual. Last year, I believe in this same spring race at Martinsville, seen the last place battle was sewn up pretty early. And then another driver came back out, and Landon Castle ended up finishing last in what was, I believe, his first start for Starcom Racing at the time, being swapped in for Jeffrey Earnhardt, and working his way back down the pack. Be very interested coming up ahead for Texas next week. Got the triple header coming up, and the Truck Series return of the Xfinity Series from a 1-week hiatus, and then the Cup Series, the Aero package again for the 1.5 miles. See what happens with that. Should be interesting to see. Oh, let's keep that pulled open here in the meantime. Okay. Oh, got the family calling outside. Uh-oh, got a little live TV going on here. Hey, dude, can you get the door, man? Miles, I'm gonna need you to get the door, buddy. Oh boy. Hang on. Okay. Live TV, everyone. Okay, we're gonna hang on, folks. I got. It's okay. It's all right. It's cool. Okay, we are back. Okay. Okie dokie. So we are very close here. Let's take another look here and see what's happening. Anything new on here? Tech usually takes 90 to 120 minutes after the race. Still no word on the technical inspection procedure at the moment. And I'm still not seeing anything new on there. Wow, seems like it's running a little bit longer than usual. Let's take another look at the timing here and find out. We are 1 hour and 25 minutes approximately. Okay, so no, not too much longer. We've cleared the clock a few times here on this so far, the early stages. Let me see. I didn't plan on running through my material quite that quickly. Let's see. Let me take this opportunity also to thank everybody that's been posting reviews for the J.D. McDuffie book online. We're up to 17, which is outstanding. I had on my self-published works actually hadn't had that many hits on there before. So again, I thank you all for leaving an Amazon review. And for those of you who have ordered the book on Amazon and haven't had a chance to put a review up there, highly recommend putting something up on there. It really helps myself, also helps the publisher, and just gets the word spread out there. Anything that has more ratings is certainly to get more visibility on Amazon. It seems to be the measure of a lot of things these days. Let's see. Still don't have anything here. Well, let me see here. Hi, yes. Asking about, okay. Looks like we might have a call here, but let me cover this here first. Be more concerned about the future of Bubba Wallace's career or RPM's future as an organization, or both? Okay, well, that's a good question. I would definitely say I'm a little worried about Richard Petty Motorsports in general. I think Bubba Wallace is a talent. I think that he's proven that he can succeed in really good equipment. I think that especially at Martinsville with the 2 wins with KBM, by winning at Eldora, this is a guy that's able to win at very difficult tracks. At the same time, today, just barely getting a top 20 finish, or even, I believe he was even outside of that. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Not being in contention for the win, that speaks to possibly an issue with like the mechanical issues at the team there. I'm particularly troubled by the braking issues, much like what's happening with Rick Ware Racing in general. The brakes causing the 51 to slow down and or having practice accidents there. We saw some very troubling accidents last year that Bubba had both at Pocono and at the race over in Indianapolis. And it's concerning when you have that. I know, of course, the brakes are one of the most expensive aspects of the cars, and so that's always a really difficult thing. But hopefully that gets worked out. But I mean, and again, Bristol, I think will be an interesting signal there if he's able to move past. So because at least he had a good run there last spring, and then last August didn't really have a chance because he got tangled up at the beginning of the race and ended up falling out from contention from there. It's something that's a little bit disappointing after the problems with the 43 ended up just not being as competitive lately. But I thought, I mean, really, John Andretti had some good runs at Bristol in the 43 and some other drivers up there. Maybe that'll work, but it's I hate to see the kids struggle. I hate to see any of these guys struggle, but in particular, I think given how spectacularly he started, being able to celebrate in victory lane with his friend Ryan Blaney at Pocono in his first start, and then the second place run at Daytona. Do I see RCR eventually taking the 43? I mean, it's a possibility. Sponsorship, I'm sure, is the big issue there. It's all about the money to make that worthwhile. And the charter system on that end of the field is all scrambled up. I know the 43's charter is elsewhere. They're leasing one from somewhere else. I still can't keep that straight. It just seems like paying Peter to pay Paul, or robbing Peter to pay Paul. Oh boy, I'm out of it. Okay. But we do have a call. As Anthony posted on here, Bob Pockers just tweeted 3 minutes ago, tech inspection is done. No issues. Brad Keselowski is your winner. Austin Dillon, Matt Tiff, and Ryan Preece each missed one lug nut apiece. All 3 of them not being disqualified for that. That's a different level penalty. But Keselowski, your winner. And therefore, Cody Ware, your last place finisher today at Martinsville. So, that will be, there we go. That will be about it for this week's show. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's a little bit shorter of a thing. I apologize. We got started a little bit later here. We'll try to keep it within a reasonable time after the finish of the race. But in the meantime, stay tuned to the Nadu 1064 account on YouTube, or just pull up my name, Brock Beard, on the account. I'm looking to maybe do another terrible broadcast coming up here, maybe the next week or so. I don't have a firm schedule on that as I figure out how long it takes to get these scrambled and put together there. And in the meantime, earlier than that, of course, the last car articles for Cody Ware in the Cup Series and Gus Dean in the Truck Series, those will be coming out later tonight. And the entry list preview this week for the Texas triple header that'll be coming up after that. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Check out lastcar.info as well as the Patreon, patreon.com/lastcaronbrock for exclusive merchandise and bonus content. In the meantime, stay tuned to my Twitter at lastcaronbrock for more information. As always, thank you everyone for your support. Thank you for following the website and making it what it is. And we'll keep looking at the back of the field as the hour and a half mark has now been reached. And we look ahead to next week. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in the Lone Star State.